Touchdown!
Welcome into the latest Mac and Mose. Andy McNamara, joined by the editor of GoDucks.com, Rob Mosley. We are here to preview Oregon's game at Washington. What for some fans, probably the biggest rivalry that the Ducks have. No disrespect to the Beavers, but both matchups are huge rivalries. This one is unique because it's not an in-state school. It's maybe one of the more under-the-radar rivalries in the country in terms of just the passion on both sides of the ball. And I dare say, Rob, that this may be the biggest regular season sort of mid-year game that this program has had in over a decade.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds strange to say when so many regular season games, over the last 5 years contributed to runs to a national championship game, and so all those were critical. But we've talked a lot the last couple of weeks how this season seems sort of at a crossroads, and it feels like it's still at that same crossroads. Where's it going to go? I mean, there are some signs early on that this was going to be another really good year in amongst many lately, and then there's been signs certainly the last 2-3 weeks that this is an Oregon team that's really taking a step back this season and going to have to rebuild off of this. So as you go into this Washington game, if the Ducks can't pull this one out, you start to really wonder about bowl eligibility and things like that, because you look farther down the schedule and you look at what Stanford did to UCLA and some other results around the country and think, okay, this team's going to have an uphill battle. If Oregon comes through and beats the Huskies and does it in convincing fashion, thanks to the stability at quarterback play they hope to have this week and going forward, and things like that, maybe the narrative changes considerably in a good way. So 2-3 weeks now where we go into a game thinking, man, I don't know, still not sure what to make of this Oregon season, but I feel like I'll know a lot more once the game's finished.
Washington is coming off a big win, a road win at USC that was somewhat unexpected, I think, for anyone that follows the Pac-12 conference. They had a tough loss early in the year against Boise State, where they played another top 25 team very, very close. Their issue has been offense this year in terms of just being able to put up enough points to really make their stout defense take advantage, I guess, of their defense. Statistically, they're the best defensive team in the Pac-12. I will say this, though, Oregon had a chance, not a successful one, but they faced Utah already, and maybe the numbers aren't the same, but Utah's a pretty salty defense in their own right. So I don't think Washington's going to show them anything out of the ordinary.
Right.
But the offense, we talked about it earlier in the week when we were wrapping up the Washington State game. I mean, the offense has to get back to some semblance of Oregon football, and they were unable to sort of put their foot on the throat against Washington State despite having a big lead in the fourth quarter. And a lot of that, is just that herky-jerky sort of no real flow that we've seen lately. Mark Helfrich has gone on record this week to say that the plan is to go with one quarterback, and hopefully that will change things. He's not saying who that quarterback is at this point. Devin Allen had some great comments to you yesterday. I thought, despite this kind of rough start, some really it's been really interesting to hear what the players have to say. They're taking a lot of responsibility on themselves. Rodney Hardrick spoke about it. It's the coaches tell us what to do. It's up to us to do it, essentially, is what he was getting at. And Devin, said it's not all on the quarterback on these deep balls that Oregon is unable to connect on.
Yeah, we know the Ducks are going to be able to run the ball. We know that based on the last couple of weeks. I mean, when you have Royce Freeman, when you have this kind of an offensive line, and we've seen the production, but they've got to find a way to pass the ball to offset some things, because you saw in that fourth quarter against Washington State, the whole world knew the Ducks were going to try to run the ball to get a first down, keep the clock running, and try to get out of there with that 10-point lead the Ducks had, and they couldn't do it because you just can't keep the defense honest. And obviously quarterback play is a huge factor in that. Rotating your quarterbacks, it's a hard way to get into a rhythm. We said over the last couple weeks, this is not an optimal situation. Mm-hmm. This is the coaches trying to sort of plug gaps and get through. Obviously the best case scenario, have Vernon Adams come back healthy and 100%. And he's been working towards that for a few weeks. So if this is the week, great. That's best case scenario. But just playing one guy allows him to get in rhythm. But it's not just the quarterback. Devin Allen's comments were such that the Oregon receivers, they're not running a defined route, like you're used to seeing on a piece of paper, where the receiver runs
or
up 10 yards.
Game.
Right.
You pick, okay, this is the route he's going to
Right. He's going to run 10
run.
yards and hang a left, and I'm going to hit him right there. Receivers have a lot of decisions to make based on the coverage they see during the flow of a play, depending on how a safety reacts or what a cornerback does. And the quarterback anticipates that. The quarterback sees the same thing in the coverages and assumes his receiver is going to do what they've game planned for against that sort of coverage. And Devin Allen said, hey, the receivers haven't always been making the right decisions. He's a fast guy. He wants to beat everybody off the line and go deep and haul in deep balls. And there's been some instances where there was an opening there for him to cut off a route underneath and come back to the ball and make a medium range gain, which, in the spread option, you get a guy a ball in space, one-on-one with the defender, get him a short pass and let him run. That's the whole point of the thing. But he's been trying to beat everybody deep so he can help his quarterbacks more by coming back to the ball, making a play, not trying for the home run every play. So, obviously there's huge issues with the quarterbacks, and they've gotten a lot of criticism, and some of it's deserved. But there are things that other guys on the offense can do to help the passing game get going that hasn't been happening. That whether it's Adams or Lockie or Alley, they can get a little bit more help than they've been getting.
Let's talk a little bit about the Oregon defense now. They've had stretches this season. They've had spans of a half or maybe even 3 quarters where they've played really well. They've taken a lot of blame for this start, and I think it's unfair. I know statistically they're not ranked very high in several categories, particularly pass defense. But this is a matchup against Washington, a team that is in the second year under head coach Chris Peterson, who I think anyone who watches college football believes is going to have this program back to, if not an elite level, a very high level in short order, just based on his track record. And so far, on the defensive side of the ball, they've made huge progress. Offensively, they're still a work in progress. They're relying on some very young players at quarterback and at running back. Their best offensive player is probably Gaskins, who's a true freshman. The quarterback, Browning, isn't asked to do a ton in the offense. His numbers don't really jump off the page at you. So it might be a situation for the Oregon defense, if they can come out and play their best football and execute the game plan. Washington shouldn't be a team offensively that can pile up the points. So, whether or not the Ducks are able to cut it loose, like Mark Helfrich says, or if they're worried about making mistakes, and I think that's something that has plagued them in the early part of the season.
This sets up as a matchup. We know how good the Ducks have been when they get to 30 points in regulation over the years. They're almost a sure win, and this sets up as a matchup where you think, if the offense can get rolling and put up 31, 35 points, Huskies, shouldn't have enough offense to keep up in that. The question for me, though, is where's Oregon's heads at defensively? Because if you look at the second half against Colorado and the first 3.5 quarters against Washington State, this defense was playing really, really well. If you limit the Cougars to 21 points in that game, you've done a great job against that offense. Unfortunately, offense, defense, everything really collapsed late in the fourth quarter and then in overtime against Washington State. I guess the Cougars more than doubled their point total from that point on. So how did that affect the Oregon defense's confidence? Because they had been playing better. They had been showing signs. Statistically, last year and this year, this team has had its issues, but they were playing well enough at that point to help the team win. And can they get back to that level? And cause some confusion for Browning. The pass rush has been really, really good. I think you're talking about a dozen sacks over the last 2 games. So can they get to him a little bit and fluster him and get him out of sorts? The early play from the defense and kind of the level of confidence they're playing with or not will be something to watch.
In the secondary, Charles Nelson expected to see some time at safety again this week. Reggie Daniels was unavailable last week. If he comes back, maybe that allows Charles to play on offense a little bit more. But Nelson's first foray into defense, 12 tackles, led the team. I think that's an area, whether it's Charles, who is a new guy on the defense, or a Tyree Robinson, or a Springs, somebody back there, I think, needs to, I don't want to say just have a big game, but become a presence so that it takes some pressure off the whole unit. And, I would say that if you're Washington, you're probably saying, okay, we got this young quarterback. Our passing game hasn't been our strong point, but shoot, we're playing the Ducks.
Right.
So, here's our chance. So it's a big game, I think, for those guys as well.
And they aren't afraid to throw with Browning, even though he's a freshman. They aren't afraid to throw it. So there'll be some opportunities there. And kind of to your point, this defense has given up yards and given up points over the years, but how they've stayed competitive is in no small part due to forcing turnovers. And that's when they're at their best, when they're forcing turnovers. You saw it at Colorado forcing a couple. So if they can, and a couple fumbles, Washington State had. So yeah, an early turnover and an early interception of Browning could obviously totally tilt the scales. Unfortunately, defensively, you don't want to be in a position of counting on turnovers or feeling like you need a turnover in order to stop the other team. And unfortunately, there's been some times this year where it felt like that was the Ducks' best shot. So. Either if they're stout, fantastic, that's the best case scenario. But if Washington's going to try to push it down the field, make a play and really start tilting the scales.
Well, this game will be on ESPN2. It's at 7:30 Pacific time. Those of you on the East Coast, our condolences. 10:30 kickoff for you. The Ducks and the Huskies. Oregon going for 12 in a row in this series. They're already at the longest winning streak for either side in the history of this long rivalry that started back in 1900. So, lots on the line. The Huskies obviously are going to be very motivated to try to end that streak. And for this particular group of Ducks, particularly the seniors, they don't want to be known as the class that lost to Washington. So this should be a great game, and it will say a lot, as we mentioned at the outset, about Oregon's season going forward. In the meantime, if you have questions, comments for us, things you'd like us to discuss on the next edition of Mac and Mose, you can get us on Twitter. I am at McNamara UO. He is at Duck Football. Until next time, we'll see you.
Gets the corner into the end zone for the touchdown. It's through 50. He's got the speed. Touchdown.